Stardew Valley, a cozy RPG simulator which has sold over 30 million copies since its release, and yet I had somehow not got around to playing it. I know it's crazy, but please put pitchforks down because all that's about to change. As I plan on achieving as much as possible over the next 100 days, I have decided to set myself 3 main goals for this playthrough. I want to complete the community centre, I want to max out my player skills, and also earn 1 million gold total. But first, I needed to create my character, who I named Prawn, because who doesn't still live by their childhood nickname? With the recent 1.6 update, the Meadowlands farm was added, so it wasn't hard to guess which farm I was going to choose to be my new home for the first ever 100 days. And so, we began our adventure to become the best farmer Pelican Town has to offer. By now, I'm sure everyone knows how the story goes, but if not, it starts by seeing our grandpa handing us a sealed envelope on his deathbed. But he insists that I'm only to open it when the pressures of modern life become too heavy to handle. And with that, he passes away peacefully. Fast forward a few years working at our dead-end job at the JoJo Corporation, now is the perfect time to open up the envelope, revealing the deed to 100 Days Farm. So I pack up my belongings and make my way to the valley. Upon arrival, I was greeted by Robin, who showed me to my farm, where Mayor Lewis was waiting for me, giving me a warm welcome to Pelican Town on behalf of everyone. I then call it a night, eager for what tomorrow will bring. The next morning, I woke up bright and early to find a parcel waiting for me, which took me far too many attempts to get into, which is slightly embarrassing, but eventually I managed it, receiving 15 hay for my troubles. Heading outside, I took a look around, noticing that the farm had its very own coop, so I placed down some of the hay I'd just received into the feeding troughs for the baby chickens, who are named Nod and Winky. With that now taken care of, I began clearing the area outside the house of wood, fibre and stone, which turns out it uses quite a lot of energy, so I headed into town, introducing myself to anyone I came across on my travels. While exploring, I also stumbled across this door that read only a master of the 5 ways may enter, although I'm not sure what that means just yet, so instead I headed into Pierre's, where I bought 30 parsnip seeds before heading back to the farm, where I worked into the night tilling the soil and planting seeds, although I only managed to plant half of them before running out of energy, so with no other option I called it a night. The next morning I finished planting the remaining seeds and watered the ones that I planted yesterday, and then I showed Nod and Winky some attention. I'd also received a letter from Willie telling me that he'd returned from a fishing trip and that he had something to give me, so I headed off down to the beach, where I found Willie standing on the edge of a pier. He then handed me a training rod, and of course, I instantly tried it out, catching my first fish, a sardine. I then headed to the mountain lake, where I ran into Linus, who, just so you know, quickly became my favourite person in Pelican Town. I then fished for the rest of the day, gaining level 1 fishing that night. Side note, I tried to sell driftwood and some broken glass I'd caught earlier, but they sell for nothing. It was worth a shot, I guess. The next morning it was raining, which was handy as it meant I didn't need to water the crops, so I headed to the mountain lake to do some more fishing. After catching a few more fish, I headed to Willie's shack, selling off all the fish I had managed to catch, earning myself 1200 gold, before spending the rest of the day at the mountain lake. Nod and Winky were now fully grown, and had started to lay eggs, which prompted a journal update telling me to build a silo, something I never even got round to during the first 100 days. But maybe I'll get round to it in the next 100. Instead, I headed back to Willie's, where I sold off all the fish I'd caught the night before, allowing me to upgrade to the fiberglass rod, as well as purchasing some bait. Heading back into town, I accepted a quest to help Penny by giving her some flounder, but I completely misread the journal entry and brought her a salad from the saloon. After handing it over to Penny, I realised my mistake. Well, let's hope she enjoyed the salad, because she never did get the flounder she wanted. Marnie had stopped by the farm because she'd found a stray cat in need of adoption, and of course I couldn't say no, eventually deciding on the name Dragon. I'd also received another letter, this time from Jojo Mart, informing me that the landslide caused by their drilling operation had now been removed. Some of the parsnip seeds I had planted were now ready to be harvested, so I headed to town to sell them at Pierre's, but instead I ended up meeting Mayor Lewis at the abandoned community centre, where I spotted this little green grape looking fella, although Mayor Lewis apparently couldn't see him. Exploring the centre some more, I found a scroll on the floor that had a load of gibberish written on it, which I was unable to read. Eventually, I managed to make it to Pierre's, where I sold the parsnips and bought myself 13 potato seeds and 2 cauliflower seeds. Returned to the farm, I planted the crops and then headed off to the mines, where I was greeted by Marlon, who handed me a rusty sword to defend myself from the monsters below. Heading down into the mines, I found my first geode and managed to make it to level 5, before heading back home, gaining level 1 farming overnight. Before heading out for the day, I checked the fortune teller on the TV, and it turns out the spirits were not in my favour. But it was raining, meaning that I didn't have to water the crops today, so at least something went in my favour. The local town wizard had sent me a letter telling me he had some information regarding the problem at the community centre. So I headed straight to the wizard tower, and once inside, he summoned the little green grape fella before heading off to check out the problem for himself. Upon his return, he made me drink from the cauldron, causing me to have an hallucination. Once my head had landed firmly back down on solid ground, I headed Pierre's, where I sold off more crops before buying another round of seeds. I then returned to the community centre, and this time I was able to read the scroll, allowing me to see the bundles that I needed to complete within the crafts room. The next morning, I took care of a few chores around the farm and then headed to the travelling cart to see if she had anything good to offer, although even if she did, I wouldn't even been able to afford anything. While exploring the town for the items required for the spring foraging bundle, I came across a few fully grown spring onions, so of course I picked them before heading back to the community centre, handing in a dandelion, leek and wild horseradish. But I was unable to find a daffodil, so I spent the rest of the day searching, but with no such luck, I headed home for the night. There was another letter waiting for me in my mailbox the next morning, this time from Mum, who sent me some of my favourite cookies. While heading to the mines, I finally found a daffodil, so I turned it into the community centre, completing the spring foraging bundle, unlocking the pantry and fish tank bundles. I then headed into the mines where I found a chest on level 10 containing a pair of leather boots, and by the end of the day I had managed to make it to level 17, but I'd left it a little bit too late to make it all the way home, passing out in the mud at the entrance to the farm. I awoke on day 9 to find a letter from the JoJo Corporation informing me that I'd been charged 93 gold to move me to my bed. Seems a little bit too steep for the 10 steps that it took them to drag me to my door. After a few days in the mines, I'd managed to gather a nice amount of copper ore, so I placed down a furnace and started smelting them into copper bars. I'd received 30 spring seeds for completing the spring foraging bundle, so I planted them down next to the potato seeds and then headed to the community centre, where I turned in a parsnip, eel, bream, seashell and carp to their respective bundles. Back in the mines, I'd made it down to level 20, where I found another chest, receiving a steel sword, eventually reaching level 25 before heading home, this time making it safely under my bed covers. Looking to purchase more seeds, I headed to Pierre's, but it turns out he's closed on a Wednesday, so I headed to Clint's instead to look at the available upgrades, but this was something I was not able to afford just yet. With nothing else planned for the day, I headed back to the mines, where I made it down to level 31, where I was unable to see, so I retreated for now until I could return with some torches. Returning back to the farm, I placed anything of value inside the shipping bin, and then that night I gained level 2 mining, unlocking the staircase, something I wish I used sooner. The potatoes I planted earlier were now ready to be harvested. Robin had also sent me a letter asking me to be on the lookout for her favourite axe that she had managed to lose somewhere around the valley. I then sold off the potatoes at Pierre's, purchasing more parsnip seeds, as I'd still not managed to gain the 5 gold quality ones which I needed for the quality crop bundle. But before heading back to the farm to plant them, I went to Clint's, where I opened a few geodes and bought some salads from Gus. Back on the farm, I placed down a scarecrow, which will hopefully keep my crops safe from the pesky birds, and then spent the rest of the day fishing at the mountain lake. And that night, before heading home, I turned in a bullhead and a largemouth bass to the lake fishing bundle. I was running pretty low on coal, so I decided to start using the charcoal kilns, allowing me to use some of the wood I had stored up, gaining 1 piece of coal for every 10 wood. I then headed to Willie's, selling off any of the fish I caught the night before, and then remembered that the bookseller was also in town, so I headed over to see what he had available, but of course I forgot all my tools except a fishing rod, so I was unable to clear the weeds in my way, so it will have to wait until next time. With only my rod to hand, I decided to spend the rest of the day fishing, gaining level 5 fishing as I slept, choosing to unlock the profession fisher, meaning that fish now sold for 25% extra gold. Today was the day. It was time for the town's annual Easter egg hunt, so I headed to town, where I first stopped by at the stall, buying 50 strawberry seeds. I then took part in the egg hunt, which I thought I was killing by the way, but my excitement was short-lived when I lost to Abigail. The next morning, I headed straight to the mines, after watering the crops of course, this time bringing the torches, placing them down on each level. I also decided to place a chest down outside the elevator so that I could now come back up and empty my inventory when it was full. By the end of the day, I had managed to make it to level 40, gaining a slingshot from another chest, and then passed out just outside the mines. Another round of parsnip seeds were ready to be harvested, as well as the green beans I planted. I then began expanding the crop area, ready to plant the strawberry seeds I bought at the fair, before heading to Pierre's to purchase more parsnip seeds, as I had still not been able to get the 5 gold quality ones required. It had now become somewhat of a routine to search through the trash as I was passing by, and this time I hit the jackpot, finding some more cookies. I finally got round to planting the strawberry seeds on the 16th. This meant that I would get 2 full harvests out of the crops before the end of the season. Although I must say I relied on the wiki for a lot of this information regarding crops. Trust me when I say I'm not that clever. I also tried to leave a space in the middle for sprinklers when planting the crops. Little did I know it would be a while before I got the required levels to unlock them, so it was good old fashioned watering can for now. I then headed to Clint's, where I opened a few geodes before turning them into Gunfer at the museum, gaining a reward, which turned out to be cauliflower seeds. These took 12 full days to grow, and it was the 16th. This meant that I needed to plant them today, otherwise I would have to wait until next spring. So I rushed home and planted them as soon as I could. On day 17 it was raining again, so no watering for me today. The wild seeds I had planted earlier had fully grown, gaining cauliflower, meaning that I could now finish the spring crop bundle. So I headed off to the community centre, handing it over, unlocking the boiler room bundle. While I was nearby, I popped into Robin's to see what she had to offer, but of course, I couldn't afford anything just yet, so I spent the rest of the day fishing, trying to earn a few extra pennies. That night, earning 2,169 gold. The next morning, I checked the fortune teller, and much to my surprise, the spirits were not upset, which only meant one thing: it was time for the mines. But first, I collected some eggs and then got caught by Mayor Lewis digging through the trash, who was a little disgusted by my actions. I wonder what he would say if he knew about all the other times. I had now gained enough cash to allow me to upgrade my axe at Clint's, who told me it would be ready in a couple of days. And finally, by noon, I made it to the mines, where I found a monster compendium. Although, I only managed to make it down another 5 levels before passing out that night, so not much of a good day after all. The next morning, another round of parsnips were ready, and thankfully this time, I finally got the 5 gold quality ones needed for the quality crop bundle. With still no axe, I decided to spend another day in the mines, where I found a dwarf scroll, and eventually made it to level 50 of the mines, gaining another pair of boots. The next day, I turned in 2 artifacts I found in the mines to Gunther, and then collected my upgraded axe from Clint's, before handing over my pickaxe for a straight swap. I then headed to Pierre's, where Morris showed up, and decided to try and steal all of his customers by offering 50% off. But not to worry, I know enough about the Stardew Valley community to know that if I take that offer, I will be murdered in my sleep. My new axe now meant that I could chop down the hardwood stumps, so I went round collecting as many as I could, completing the construction bundle, unlocking the bulletin board. While heading to see what the travelling cart had to offer, I saw Jazz and Vincent looking rather scared by the overflow pipe to the sewers, running away from whatever they saw, so I went to check it out. As well, I will not be scared so easily. And of course, the travelling cart was a flop once again, so it was back to more fishing, which had become my main money earner up to this point. That night, I gained level 4 farming and level 6 fishing. I remembered to check the fortune teller on the TV again, and it turns out they weren't so happy today, but at least my pickaxe was ready at Clint's, so I stopped off to collect it, and then sold all the fish I caught, allowing me to purchase the backpack from Pierre's, which was a nice little upgrade. The travelling book salesman was back in town, and this time I remembered to take something to clear the nearby weeds, but it was all well out of my price range at the moment, so maybe next time. Having my pickaxe meant that I could once again head back into the mines, where I managed to pass out, waking up next to Robin at the top of the mines. Turns out, it was indeed a bad luck day after all. I'd received another letter from Willie, informing me that he had a few new rods he would like me to come check out, but I decided to head to the mines instead, looking for redemption after yesterday, where I ended up killing this little slime with a star on his head, receiving a forest sword for my troubles. On level 60, I found another chest, gaining a new dagger, eventually making it to level 65 before heading home for the night. The first harvest of strawberries were ready on day 24, so I collected them up and then went to the dance festival, where I stood there like a sore thumb, watching everyone else have a great time. With nothing else left to do, I spent what was left of the evening chopping down some of the trees on the farm. Demetrius stopped by early the next morning, asking me what I would prefer to be set up in the cave. I chose to go with fruit bats. While exploring the area, I somehow stumbled across Robin's axe. Okay, maybe the wiki come in handy once again. So, I raced over to Robin's house, handing it back over to her. While foraging on the beach, I'd found this broken wooden bridge, which required 300 wood to repair it. I currently didn't have that many logs, so it'll have to wait for now. But I did finally manage to check out the new rod that Willie had to offer, the iridium rod. But somehow, I managed to misclick and purchased another fiberglass rod, leaving me 1,800 gold down. So I spent the rest of the day moping around fishing by the dock, and of course, Willie stopped by to rub salt in my wounds. I stopped by the cave the next morning to see if anything had grown yet, finding only a single apricot. I then headed to the saloon, beating Gus to the bar, buying a few more salads, which was currently my go-to energy source. And eventually I headed back to the mines, making it down another 25 floors, reaching level 80, receiving another pair of boots, and getting level 4 mining that night. Day 27 was another day in the mines, but unfortunately it didn't go quite as well as the day before, passing out on level 89, where I was found by Linus this time. And just like that, it was the last day of spring, and that only meant one thing: another harvest of strawberries ready. So I collected them up and placed them in the shipping bin before heading to the community centre, as the last few days I'd spent in the mines allowed me to find the final items for the geologist bundle, as well as turning in the blacksmithing bundle, completing the boiler room, where I then watched the Junimos celebrate. And with that, our very first star was mounted above the fireplace. Jodie had asked for a cauliflower a few days ago, so I handed one over, gaining another 350 gold, and then headed to the travelling cart, where I found a red cabbage seed, which can only be purchased on year 2. But I have a confession to make. You can tick a box in the advanced settings that makes sure it is available within the first year. I then headed to Clint's to open more geodes, and turned anything new into Gunther. I then spent the rest of the day fishing at the mountain lake, and that night the Junimals repaired the mine carts. Overnight I gained level 6 farming, finally unlocking the quality sprinklers. Summer was officially upon us, and I had big plans. But first, I wanted to craft as many sprinklers as I could. Turns out I only had enough material for 8, so I got to work clearing the dead crops and placed down the ones that I already had crafted. I then plotted out all the other spaces using wooden planks, so I couldn't place any crops there by mistake, and then headed to Pierre's, where I bought 125 blueberry seeds, 10 chili seeds, 2 poppy seeds, 2 tomato seeds, and 10 corn seeds. I then stopped by the saloon to top up on salads before returning to the farm to plant the seeds. I still had to water every crop today, as the sprinklers I placed down earlier wouldn't start working until tomorrow. It was once again raining on day 30, which is always a nice sight. I'd also run out of space on my first crop area, so I started to clear all the weeds and trees around the area just below the broken greenhouse, and then planted all the seasonal seeds I needed for bundles, and I finally got round to using the repaired minecarts, which would come in handy from now on. Heading back into the mines, I reached level 90, finding another chest, this time receiving an obsidian edge sword, and by the end of the day, I had managed to reach level 95. The next morning, the sprinklers were up and running, and what a beautiful sight it was. But it wasn't all good, because I still didn't have the required materials for the remaining ones I needed. Another letter appeared in my mailbox, this time from Mayor Lewis, who had somehow managed to lose his lucky purple shorts, tasking me with finding them and requested that I must be discreet about it. Looks like old Lewis has a few secrets. But for now, the shorts debacle will have to wait, as I needed more resources for the missing sprinklers, so I headed back into the mines, where I reached level 100, finding my very first star drop, increasing my energy levels. I then re-cleared high levels of the mines searching for the necessary ores, and that night I earned level 5 mining, choosing the miner profession, which meant I would gain 1 extra ore per vein. Not a lot happened on day 32 as it was back down in the mines searching for more ores. I had now managed to place down all the required sprinklers for my first crop area, which felt like quite the achievement. I then realised that I had not visited the fruit bat cave for a while, and to my surprise there was a nice amount of fruit waiting for me when I did. I had managed to gather a few more geodes that I wanted to open, so I headed to Clint's, just missing him for the day. But it wasn't all to waste. Remember that broken bridge down by the beach? I finally got round to using the 300 wood to repair it, unlocking the tide pool, where I collected up the available coal and sea urchins. I then headed to the community centre, where I turned in some of the fruit I picked up earlier into the artisan bundle, completing the summer foraging bundle. The next morning something weird was going on. It was raining, but not just normal rain, it was raining green, and it had covered all the trees with moss. Overnight I had unlocked the ability to craft tappers, so I placed one on a pine tree and another on a maple tree. I then headed to town where I was unable to find anyone. Turns out everyone had gathered in the saloon, as most of them were worried by the current situation. While checking around town to see if anything else had happened, I come across this strange guy down by the tide pools, who told me that he had an old amulet to sell, but I was not ready for such a thing. And just as quick as the green rain arrived, did it leave, as the next day it was all back to normal. So I headed to Clint's where I opened some geodes, turning in anything new to gun for, earning myself a drum block and a futon bear. I then went to Willie's to buy some more bait, who was pretty cryptic about the door directly behind him. Hopefully he will spill the beans at some point, but for now I spent the rest of the day fishing, looking for the remaining fish for some of the bundles. Eventually I managed to complete the ocean bundle, as well as the lake fishing bundle. Day 36 started off by chopping down some more trees, as I needed more wood, allowing me to purchase a barn from Robbins. But I forgot to clear the area of stones and wood, so I headed back to the farm and cleared what I could, but of course somehow I managed to miss a few. So for now, it would have to be placed in front of the coop, blocking Nod and Winky inside. I know, before you say it, I'm a pretty bad chicken owner. I then tried to use normal fertiliser on an oak tree sapling, but of course, that didn't work, because as I come to find out later, they have their own type of fertiliser. Trust me when I say, I felt pretty stupid when this didn't work. It was time for another day down in the mines, and this time it was a good day. I'd managed to reach all the way down to level 120, where of course, you guessed it, I found another chest, this time gaining the skull key. That night, I gained level 5 combat, unlocking the profession fighter, meaning that all attacks now dealt 10% more damage. One of the tappers had now produced its first jar of pine tar. The red cabbage seed I planted earlier was now fully grown, so I collected this as well, and then headed to Clint's to open some geodes. Standing in front of his door for far too long before I realised it was the town luau today, so I headed to the beach where I placed some grapes into the soup. Talking to some of the locals, I had finally managed to introduce myself to everyone. Not sure how it took until day 39, but it turns out George had been pretty elusive. With that, it was now time for the governor to try this year's soup, but he was rather displeased, calling it average. The first round of peppers were now ready to be collected. I then headed to Pierre's where I bought an apple sapling for 4,000 gold, rather expensive if you ask me, but needs must. I then went to Clint's where I opened even more geodes before turning in anything new to gun for. The travelling cart was once again back in town, so I stopped by to check it out, but like always, there was nothing of value available. I had now gained level 5 foraging, where I chose the forester profession, gaining 25% more wood from chopping down trees. I'm not sure what I did on day 41, but I did end up buying a cow, who I named Biscuit, and after leaving Robin's, I'd noticed the steps behind her house had become unblocked. So I headed up to check it out, finding some train tracks and a pool house. And I finally got round to moving the barn into the right spot, allowing Nod and Winky to finally be able to leave the coop. The blueberries were now fully grown, allowing me to harvest them for the first time. So of course, with the prospect of more money coming in, you know it's going to be a good day. The melons I also planted were now ready, but I didn't get any gold quality ones, which I needed for the quality crop bundle. So I headed to the community centre, handing in a blueberry, completing the summer crop bundle, and then sold off today's harvest to Pierre's, getting 25,000 gold. I then bought 20 more melon seeds. With all that money burning a hole in my pocket, I decided to head over to Clint's, where I purchased another axe upgrade. Once back at the farm, I planted some more melon seeds, and then decided to head back to Pierre's to buy even more because for some reason I was panicking about not getting the 5 gold quality ones required for the quality crop bundle. The next morning, the maple tree had now produced a jar of syrup, so I collected it, as well as some of the sunflower, summer squash, and starfruit. Heading back to town that night, I saw a cutscene where Linus was nearly caught rummaging through the trash. Thankfully, George thought it was a local raccoon asking me to take care of them. And then, if it couldn't get any more awkward, Gus came outside from the saloon, but thankfully he was rather nice to Linus, handing over a basket of food. My upgraded axe was now ready for collection at Clint's. I then purchased even more melon seeds. Trust me, I was stressing out about this, but it was nothing compared to the stress I suffered later in the year. I decided to also stop by Robin's to look into an upgrade, but it turns out she doesn't work on a Tuesday. With the newly upgraded axe, I was finally able to chop down the trees located near the travelling cart, gaining access to the secret woods. Turns out, each day, the hardwood stumps reappear, allowing me to collect 15 hardwood per day. I then fished in the pond for the rest of the day, and eventually managed to catch the wood skip, required for the specialty fish bundle. The next morning, I headed to Robin's again, and thankfully this time she was there, so I commissioned her to upgrade the coop. I then popped into the community centre, where I turned in the wood skip and the oak resin into the enchanter's bundle. On day 46, another round of blueberries were ready for harvest, and after selling them off for a nice amount of cash, I decided to treat myself to the final backpack upgrade for 10,000 gold. 2 of my oak trees that I was planning on using for the oak resin had now fully grown, which was still pretty slow progress without being able to craft the required tree fertilizer. I then spent most of the day fishing on the docks before heading to the secret forest, which had now become part of my daily routine. With the coop upgrade now finished, it meant that the capacity had been increased, so I headed to Marnie's where I purchased a duck who I named Arlo. Side note, Biscuit, Dragon and Arlo are names of our guinea pigs and rabbit. Let me know down in the comments which one you think my children named. I then headed to the community centre where I turned in a few more items, handing over the required hay for the fodder bundle, as well as a slice of cheese and cherry to the artisan bundle. And then I decided to purchase the 2,500 gold bundle, leaving only the 2 more expensive ones remaining. It was the annual trout derby today down at the lake. Basically, you have a chance of finding a golden ticket for each trout you catch, which you can then hand in, receiving a reward. By the time I got bored of fishing, I'd managed to earn 2 tickets. Turning them into the vendor, I received a tent kit and 2 triple shot espressos. I won't lie, I kind of felt like I'd just wasted a day. Safe to say, I won't be doing that again. But before heading back home, I went to check on the crab pots I'd placed down a few days ago, which had yet to catch anything. The travelling cart was back in town, and with a little extra spare cash, I decided to purchase a rare seed for 1,000 gold. Running low on bait, I headed to Willie's, but it turns out it doesn't work on a Sunday, so I used up what I had left catching a pufferfish, which could only be caught between 12 and 4 PM on a sunny day. I then headed to Gunther, where I received my first rare crow, after turning in a few more artifacts, so of course I sprinted back to the farm where I placed it down. We was now at the halfway point of our first 100 days. Another round of blueberries were ready to be picked, and you know what that means.
Here comes the money, 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 money.
Which meant I could now buy the 10,000 gold bundle, leaving only 1 more remaining. I was determined to try and make my farm look a little nicer by the end of the 100 days, so I stopped by Robin's to purchase a few different decorative floor tile choices and then headed back to the mines, where I completed a monster sleigh goal, receiving this crappy sword for my troubles. And that night, a strange man flew by, dropping off a load of packages into the town. I decided now was a good time to grab my pickaxe, so I headed over to Clint's and handed it over, and on my way back to the farm I got a notification that the train was passing by, so I rushed over to the tracks to see, receiving a few pieces of coal for my troubles. I then headed back to the farm where I began the process of trying to make the farm look a little bit nicer, and let me tell you, the amount of times I adjusted this path nearly drove me to insanity. After all the fun yesterday, the lightning rods had produced a battery. I was a little miffed at the time as to what this would be used for, but eventually it came in handy. Continuing the renovations on the farm, I decided to extend the fenced area for the animals, and with all the rain we'd been having, they had managed to eat all their hay. So I made a quick pit stop to Marnie's and restocked the food troughs. And just like that, a few days had passed and my pickaxe was ready to be collected from Clint's. After checking on the crab pots once again and finding nothing, I decided to look it up, and it turns out you must place bait in them, which made me feel pretty stupid that I did not realise this sooner. I'd like to say I got more achieved today, but I didn't. I just spent the rest of the day playing around with the setup in the farm. But I did gain level 7 foraging, finally unlocking tree fertilizer. On day 54, the stupid amount of melons I planted in my blind panic were now ready to be harvested, as well as the final round of blueberries. So I placed down a few kegs I'd recently crafted and placed some blueberries inside, as I needed to make some wine for the enchanters bundle, and then sold off the rest to Pierre's, making sure I had a nice amount of cash for fall. I also finally was able to fertilize the oak tree setup, this time not looking like an idiot in the process. It was once again Friday, and this meant one thing: the travelling cart was back in town, and today she produced the goods, finding a rabbit's foot, which I also needed for the enchanters bundle, and of course, after putting the bait in the crab pots yesterday, they had managed to catch a shrimp, which now meant I could complete the crab pot bundle, and turned in the rabbit's foot. I also turned in 5 gold melons and 5 corn, and it was at this point I realised I panicked over nothing, because I only needed to hand over 3 of the 4 bundles. I had a few quests outstanding in my journal, so I handed a hot pepper in to George, who in typical grumpy old man fashion decided to mourn, and I then found Demetrius, giving him a melon for his research. I planned on planting even more seeds next season, so I expanded my second crop area even further. It was the last day of summer, and with nothing much else planned, I headed to the mines for most of the day, collecting up more resources, and then went to witness the moon jellies passing by Pelican Town. And just like that, in a flash, it was now time for my favourite season, so I got to work clearing the dead crops and then headed to Pierre's where I bought 200 pumpkin seeds, and by the end of the day I managed to get them all planted. I also had some money left over, so I bought the final bundle, completing the vaults. The grapes I had placed in the preserve jar had now finished, allowing me to turn in some jelly, completing the artisan bundle. That night, the Junimos danced around the bus, and just like that it was fixed. If only it worked like that in real life. The next morning, I remembered that the rare seed I purchased earlier was to be planted in fall, so I planted it, although I didn't know how long it would take to grow. I then headed to town where I found Robin and Mayor Lewis fixing up the special request board, but instead of accepting any quests, I headed to Mountain Lake where I spent the rest of the day fishing. I'd yet to complete the fall foraging bundle, so I took a wander around town to try and find the outstanding items. I also accepted a quest from Clint, who wanted me to kill 50 enemies within the mines. On day 60, I headed into the mines to try and kill the required 50 enemies, and by the end of the day, I'd managed to kill 42 out of 50, so not a bad day at all. That night, I saw a fairy fly over the farm, sprinkling some of her magic. The crops she had sprinkled had managed to fully grow overnight. It was a shame she didn't do the whole farm, but I suppose you can't have everything. I then placed the pumpkins into the kegs, which after a few days will create pumpkin juice. I also finally got round to taking a trip on the recently repaired bus. Arriving at the desert, I fished at the nearby pond, easily catching a sandfish. And then I paid a visit to Sandy, who just so turns out to sell mannequins for 12,000 gold. I then headed down into the school caverns, where I was attacked by a few serpents and ended up passing out on level 5, which led to my first trip to Harvey's surgery, losing a few items in the process. I'd managed to catch all the remaining fish required for the fish tank bundle, turning in a walleye to the nighttime fishing, a tiger trout to the river fishing, and a sandfish I found at the school cavern pond into the specialty fish bundle. And with that, Junimos brought the old fish tank back to life. On day 62, I headed back into the mines, killing the remaining 8 enemies, completing the cave patrol quest for Clint, receiving 6,000 gold for my efforts. As I headed back outside the mines, I found Willie checking out the hole that now remains from the removal of the glittering boulder, as a result of completing the fish tank bundle. After a brief conversation, he handed me a copper pan, which of course I put straight on my head. Getting back into town, I found a token waiting for me at the special request board. I followed its instructions, heading into Mayor Lewis's, adding it into the machine, receiving 12 broccoli seeds, and from what it looks like, the rewards get greater the more you hand in. Clint had left a note for me in my mailbox the next morning, thanking me for clearing out the monsters within the mines, rewarding me with a recipe for a geode crusher. The travelling cart was back in town, and this time I brought a purple mushroom, as I'd yet to come across one. I then went to Robin's where I purchased a barn upgrade for 12,000 gold, before heading into the school caverns, passing out once again. Honestly, this made the mines look easy, losing 30 gold ore and 11 copper ore. It was thundering once again on day 64, so I placed down 2 more lightning rods hoping for more batteries, but it turns out that they have to be down before the lightning strikes happen. So that was a wasted idea. Check the special request board, this time accepting a request from Linus, asking me to fish out 20 items of trash from the water, and with that I remembered that the pond on level 100 of the mines, all I could fish out was trash, so I headed down there once again where I was able to fish up all 20 items. I then went to the train tracks where I placed the items into the trash dumpster, receiving 500 gold. I'd also received another quest from Linus a while ago. But with no such luck, I resorted to once again using the wiki. Turns out it was hidden near the tunnels leading to the school caverns. Not a lot happened on day 65, but I did collect another reward token, receiving a peach sapling, and then spent the rest of the day fishing at the dock. The fall seeds I planted at the start of fall had now fully grown, so I harvested those and headed to Pierre's to sell a few items. But of course, it was Wednesday, so he was closed. So I headed to the lake to do a little bit of fishing, where I found Linus bathing in the lake. Let's just hope he has some pants on, because nobody needs me to catch that kind of tackle. While back at the farm, I checked in on the animals, and it turns out we had gained a new addition, who I named Quacky. Robin had now finished the barn conversion, so I went to Marnie's where I bought our first goat, who we named Boaty. Honestly, don't ask, I don't know. I still needed to make a Mackie roll and truffle for the chef bundle, but I'd yet to upgrade my house to include kitchen, so I placed down a cookout kit and made one. Now we just need a truffle. The next morning, I hopped onto the bus and headed straight to the school caverns, and with the help of a few bombs, I'd managed to make it all the way down to level 26 before jumping back on the bus and heading back to the farm, although I did learn shortly after that it was easier to pass out and lose 1000 gold. Checking the coop once again, this time I found a duck feather, which was the final item needed for the dye bundle. But before turning it in, I headed to Clint's to open a few geodes, and of course I found nothing new to hand into Gunther. I then turned the feather into the community centre, receiving a seed maker as a reward. With my stock of wood running low, I spent the rest of the day chopping down trees around the farm, unearthing a shrine with a note from my grandpa, stating, "Wait for my return on the dawn of your 3rd year." I mean, if he comes back to life, I may just lose my mind. Maybe one day we will find out. My oak trees had produced more oak resin, which was something I still needed a lot of, because I planned on building as many kegs as possible before the first harvest of pumpkins. I then headed to Pierre's to sell off anything of value. You see, while I was at work, I was looking into what I needed to do to gain truffles, and it turns out I needed to buy a pig, which would take 10 days to fully grow. And of course, just to make it even more stressful, they don't produce truffles in winter. But to be able to buy a pig, I first needed a deluxe barn. By my calculations, I would have 2 full days left after the pig is fully grown. So I headed to Robin's where I spent 25,000 gold, 550 wood and 200 stone on a deluxe barn upgrade, leaving me with only 750 gold left. So I spent some of my time foraging around Pelican Town, looking for a quick influx of cash. My first round of pumpkins were now ready to be harvested, and what a beautiful sight it was, although my farm was still looking pretty rough. I then placed some of the pumpkins into the nearby kegs. I was planning on doing this with all of them, but with the recent barn upgrade, I had to sell off some of the gold quality pumpkins so I could buy another round of seeds, earning the achievement Homesteader, or earning 250,000 gold. Safe to say, I think the 1 million gold total is a little bit out of reach. Returning to the farm, I planted the 100 pumpkin seeds, and the apple tree I planted forever ago had now started producing apples. I need 3 of them for the fodder bundle. That night, I gained level 10 farming, choosing the artisan profession. The deluxe barn construction had now finished, meaning that I can now purchase a pig. So I rushed to Marnie's, naming him Lucky because I needed all the luck I could get over the next 12 days. I then headed to the mines because I needed more iron and copper bars so that I could craft more kegs. That night, unlocking level 8 mining and level 7 combat. It had been thundering the day before, so there was another 3 batteries waiting for me at the lightning rods. It was also the Stardew Valley fair today, so I selected the best items out in my chest and turned in my display, and much to my surprise, I earned first place, gaining 1000 star tokens and earning the achievement Blue Ribbon. I then gambled 500 tokens on green, which I won, gaining 1000 in return, but when I gambled another 500 on green again, I lost it. This went on for about 5 minutes, so looking to gain more tokens, I stuck to what I knew best. Fishing up as much as I could, I eventually ended up with 2,900 tokens, so I bought myself a second star drop and also another rare crow. I also played this game, which reminded me a lot of the point blank games on PS1, where you use the light gun to shoot targets. I know I'm showing my age a bit there, but this was very nostalgic. Day 73 started by giving a little bit of attention to the ever-growing zoo of animals. I then headed off to the school caverns, passing out on level 5. Trust me when I say, there wasn't a happy gamer at the other end of the PC monitor. But back in town, I'd realised I could steal the lanterns spotted around the gravestones. I guess that kind of makes me a grave robber. And with nothing else planned for the rest of the day, I spent some of the time fishing for a little bit extra cash. The next morning, our first round of pumpkin juice was ready, so I collected them and then restocked the kegs before heading off to sell them at Pierre's, gaining 22,000 gold. The apple tree had now produced 3 apples, so I turned them in, completing the fodder bundle. I then headed to Clint's where I opened a few more geodes before handing over my pickaxe for an upgrade. I paid another visit to the travelling cart where I bought an amaranth, which Marnie had asked for a while ago, and of course I handed it straight over to her. The bookseller was back in town once again, so I had another look at what he had to offer, but I decided not to buy anything just yet. Although at the time of writing this, I wish I did. I also may have paid a visit to Jojo Mart, but I promise all I did was just have a little browse, before heading up to the railroad tracks to see the cart passing through town once again. But unfortunately this time they did not drop anything. Somehow, while back at the farm, I'd managed to use the farm totem, teleporting myself behind a rock, and of course, it would happen when I didn't have my pickaxe. Thankfully, I had enough material to make a mountain totem. My pickaxe was now ready to be collected, so I headed to Clint's before taking it for a spin in the mines, collecting up more gold ore. Day 77 was very much a repeat of the previous day, spending the whole day down in the mines. I walked the next morning to another beautiful sight. Another round of pumpkin juice was now ready. I can just smell the money already. And with all that newfound wealth, I headed to Robin's, purchasing a house upgrade for 10,000 gold and 450 wood. I then finally got round to making a geode crusher from the recipe Clint handed to me earlier. I then spent the rest of the day placing down pathways within the farm. That night, gaining another 26,000 gold from the pumpkin juice that I placed in the shipping bin. While getting ready for another day in the school caverns, I'd managed to do one of these ones. And of course, I restarted the day because I'm not fixing that mess. Note to self, don't carry bombs around the farm. But I eventually made it to the caverns, making it down to level 37 before doing another stupid thing. I had managed to click the ladder without thinking, exiting back up to the surface. Day 80 and 81 were both a repeat, heading to the school caverns once Pam had arrived at the bus stop. And on day 81, I managed to make it down to the prehistoric floor, where I faced a few fire-breathing dinosaurs, reaching my new personal best of floor 48. I awoke the next morning to find that Robin had finished my house upgrade, and it was a nice improvement from the original. The rare seed I planted at the start of fall had now fully grown, producing a sweet gemberry, and by some miracle, Lucky had now become fully grown and dug up his first truffle. Let me tell you, the sense of relief was overwhelming. Heading straight to the community centre, I turned it in, completing the chef bundle, as well as handing in a large goat milk, completing the pantry bundle. And that gemberry I harvested earlier, it turns out if you hand it into the shrine in the secret woods, you gain another star drop, taking my total to 3. As it was turning out to be such a good day, I decided to add another animal to the farm, this time purchasing a sheep, who I named Pumpkin. And while I was at Marnie's, I spotted Mayor Lewis's pink shorts in her bedroom, but I was still not good enough friends yet with Marnie to enter. Turns out Mayor Lewis's though, you dirty old dog. That night, the Junimals repaired the broken greenhouse on the farm as a reward for completing the pantry bundle. With only 2 more days left of fall, the final round of pumpkins had now fully grown, and I'll be honest, I'll be pretty sad not to see the site for another full year. I'd still not planted the peach sapling that I received from the machine in Mayor Lewis's house, because they take 28 days to fully grow and only produce fruit in summer, so I decided to place it down in the greenhouse, meaning that it would produce peaches all year round. I now had 56,000 gold, so I decided to purchase another upgrade from Robin's, this time buying a stable, and placed it down just behind the house. Another item I decided to buy was a lava katana from Marlon, due to our recent struggles with inside the school caverns. I then headed to the Spirit Seed Festival, where I bought another rare crow and made it all the way through the maze, earning a golden pumpkin. After the recent trip to the school caverns, I'd managed to stock up on a fair few geodes, handing in anything new to the museum, and then headed to the caverns once again, reaching level 55 before passing out, gaining level 8 combat. And with that, fall was officially over until next year. But waking up on day 1 of winter, I saw that Robin had finished the stables, leaving me a horse to go with it, who I decided to call Buttercup. So I immediately jumped on his back to take him for a gallop round town, where I come across this strange fella who ran off at the sight of me. So I followed him up towards the community centre, eventually finding him behind this bush, to which he handed me a magnifying glass, giving me the ability to find secret notes. I then headed to Pierre's to see what crops I could grow this season. Turns out there isn't any, so that was kind of anticlimactic. Not sure what to do for the rest of the day, I did some foraging around town for the remaining community centre items, but come up pretty much empty-handed. Although it wasn't all bad, I had managed to craft 5 iridium ore. The next morning, I sold off another round of pumpkin juice and then headed to Clint's, where I purchased another pickaxe upgrade for 25,000 gold. Returning back to the beach, I found a nautilus shell and then come across one of the hidden notes with my newfound ability. On day 87, I left my house to find a little old lady named Evelyn patiently waiting for me, gifting me a garden pot and the recipe to craft them. These pots allow crops to grow all year round, meaning on my next 100 days I can make a start on my pumpkin empire. I also returned to the mysterious door I found at the start of this playthrough and realised what the message meant. I needed to max out all my skills, which I had not managed to do just yet. Speaking of which, I was pretty close to gaining max level fishing, so I spent the rest of the day at the mountain lake. That night, while sleeping, I heard a rather large cracking sound, so I went in search of what it could be, and it turns out the large tree near the travelling cart had fallen down, leaving a quest available, which I needed 100 hardwood to complete. While tilling the ground nearby, I found a snow yam, which now meant I had everything I needed to complete the community centre, bringing it back to its former glory with a little help from the Junimals. And with their work now complete, they said their goodbyes. My pickaxe was also now finished, so I popped by Clint's to pick it up and then turned in 100 hardwood logs into the quest at the stump, making it into a tiny house. The next morning, I returned to the tree stump wondering if someone in fact moved in, and it turns out it was a raccoon who was rather hungry, asking me for 5 cockles and a largemouth bass. It would appear that this raccoon has a better taste than I do. The travelling cart was back once again, and this time I purchased another rare crow, meaning that I now had 4 out of the available 8. While in town, I saw some of the locals celebrate the newly renovated community centre, and then watched Morris get his arse handed to him by Pierre. I'd received a note with an X marks a spot on it, so I headed to the location on the picture and dug up a strange doll. The book salesman was once again back in town. This time I purchased 1 combat book and 2 woodcutter books. For completing the community centre, I was rewarded with a trophy, so I placed it proudly on display inside my house. And then I remembered that after completing the crafts room bundle, I unlocked the quarry, so I headed over and used some of the explosive slingshot ammo to break open the rocks, earning myself my very first prismatic shard in the process. Heading back home, I bumped into Linus, who invited me into his tent, where I then heard some rather unsettling noises. But thankfully, he was just making me a new kind of bait, unlocking deluxe bait. That night, I gained level 10 mining, choosing the profession prospector. The next morning, more pumpkin juice was ready, so I collected them up and then refreshed the kegs before placing down some starfruit inside the greenhouse, which I'd purchased from Sandy at the Oasis shop. I then handed Marnie a cave carrot, increasing our friendship enough that I could now retrieve Dirty Dog's purple pants, heading straight to his house to try and return them, but he wasn't in. Turns out he was chilling at Clint's, probably talking about all the fun he had with Marnie. Don't worry fella, your secret's safe with me. Heading to Willie's, he told me that he had something to show me, and ushered me through the door behind his counter. It turns out he was talking about a boat this whole time, but it was pretty run down, so he asked me if I could help him fixing it up. To do this, I need 5 batteries, 5 iridium bars and 200 hardwood, which typically I just use to repair the stump for Mr. Raccoon. Pierre stopped by to inform me that from next year he would have new crops available. I then headed to the secret woods to chop down more hardwood, finding another woodcutter book, as well as a book titled Jack Be Nimble, Jack Be Thick, clearly a play on nursery rhymes. I then headed to the desert where I walked into the centre of these 3 pillars holding the prismatic shard, turning it into a galaxy sword, so I took it for a spin in the school caverns where I still managed to pass out, getting overwhelmed by serpents. I then remembered while at the quarry I found another mine which contained a different type of enemies, this time floating skulls, and then, fighting my way through at the end, I was rewarded with a golden scythe from the Grim Reaper statue. Town was holding a festival of ice today, which was basically just another fishing game, whereby you had to catch as many fish as possible before the time runs out. I managed to catch 5, winning the festival, receiving a sailor's hat, a barbed hook, and a dress spinner. It was another day where I can tell you not a lot happened, but I did manage to find another lost book. I had a few new artifacts that I had not yet handed into Gunther, so I turned them in, receiving winter seeds as a reward. I headed back to the farm and planted them, although I'm not sure how long they take to grow. Day 96 was another day where I would love to tell you that I achieved something, but I didn't, so here's a clip of me and Buttercup riding around town. I now had the required hardwood to repair the boat, so I headed to Willie's and handed it over. It was also the yearly squid festival, so I spent the day at the docks, fishing, eventually managing to gain level 10 fishing. Turning in the 5 squid I had caught, I received 20 quality bait, 2 mystery boxes, a dish of sea, a pearl, and 3 triple shot espressos. That night, I watched Willie and Robin hard at work repairing the boat. With the boat now fully repaired, I hopped straight on board, not sure where it was going to take me. Turns out it's a little place called Ginger Island. Exploring the island, I run into this little fella who currently didn't have a name. I then followed this little flame into a volcano. Making my way through, I killed some of the enemies and they dropped golden walnuts, but eventually I decided to leave. But it turns out I needed 10 golden walnuts to open the next area by moving this fella. So back into the lava it was, where I eventually passed out. The next morning, I headed straight back to Ginger Island, where I managed to find the 10 required walnuts, unlocking another farm, and then stumbled across this woman fishing by herself, who told me her husband had been missing for many years. I then spent the rest of the day exploring the island for more walnuts, but had no such luck, eventually calling it a night, and this time I had brought myself a pop-up tent. Day 99 was spent doing much the same as the previous day, searching for more golden walnuts, where I come across this little fella, resulting to using my available tent kits to block him in. I then stumbled across this light puzzle, which took far too many attempts than I would like to admit, eventually resulting to asking my missus to record my screen. Thankfully, we managed to crack it, receiving 3 golden walnuts, allowing me to unlock the Parrot Express, before heading back to Pelican Town for our final day. And upon my return, the night market was in full swing, where I purchased another famous painting for 1200 gold and another rare crow. I then watched the most disturbing performance by a mermaid in history. Heading back to the farm, I surveyed the land and then called it a night, and with that, our first 100 days in Stardew Valley had come to an end. Unfortunately, I'd only managed to complete one of the 3 goals I'd set myself. With only 3 levels left to achieve to max out my skills, I'd wished I'd used a travelling book salesman sooner. But I am pretty happy with what I've managed to achieve over the last 100 days. If you would like to see another 100 days, please get this video to 100 likes, and like always, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe.